Hey everybody, what's going on? This is Matt. Today I wanted to talk about the self-study of learning a language versus going to a classroom or a class to learn a language. And, in my opinion, if you take a self-study approach when learning a language, it's far more effective than going to a classroom or taking a class in a language. And to be honest with you, the benefits of going to that class are very few in my opinion. And so, if you're thinking about taking a language class or something along those lines, you really should take a step back and consider a couple of things. You have to really think about the core principles of what it takes to learn a language, right? At first, we have vocabulary acquisition or acquiring words in the language. There's improving your listening, and then there's reading, and then there's a grammar aspect. And you have to realize that probably most of the aspects that you work on when you're learning a language are really independent in nature. And when you go to a classroom setting, you're really just doing these things very ineffectively, and it's very inefficient. So, if you have some teacher that's on the board and maybe you're going over some vocabulary, they give you a homework assignment, well, you don't really need to go to the classroom to learn those words. You're going to have to do something to learn the words, outside of the class probably. Same goes with listening. If you're listening to a movie in class or something along those lines, that's something that you can do in your free time. Maybe there is the benefit that you have people to practice speaking with, but I've actually seen some of the prices of taking a class for a couple of weeks, and it can be quite expensive. In the hundreds of dollar ranges, where if you do the math, it's like $40 per hour for the class. And the reality is you can get a conversation partner for far less, and you're going to be talking to a native, and you can guide that conversation to be however you want it to be. So, from a speaking perspective, that doesn't really make sense either. Maybe it makes sense from a grammar perspective. You have someone that knows the language very well. They can explain grammar concepts. They can kind of ensure accuracy or pronunciation. But the reality is there's so many free resources out there. You can go to YouTube and see a ton of great grammar explanations or on the internet for free, or even pick up a nice grammar book. And the reality is too that even if it's a little confusing at first, it's not impossible. You can eventually learn it, and you probably don't really need this teacher guiding you along the way every hour. Maybe you get someone to explain it to you in a conversation exchange or something like that. But, as a permanent kind of idea, I don't think it's really worth it. The biggest thing that these classrooms and these class settings give you is they give you a sense of a roadmap, a guide. You don't really have to think about your language learning process. You just show up, and there is a pathway set up for you on just learn this stuff, do this homework assignment. You don't really have to think about anything. In the same sense, too, I think it gives people this kind of feeling that they're actually making progress. There's this element that you're taking it from an official source, whether that's a university or some sort of program, and thus because it's official you're making progress, or it's giving them this accountability and routine that they wouldn't have done otherwise. But to be honest with you, I think that you can really set a routine. You can create goals far more effectively. You don't have to spend all of that money for the class to have an element of accountability. And in the end of the day, too, really it's only offering you so much from a learning perspective as well. So, there's that guidance aspect that maybe the class is giving you, and this feeling that you're making progress. But ultimately, if you take the self-study approach, I think you can make just so much more progress in the end of the day. And like I said, so much of the language learning process is very independent in nature, right? Learning vocabulary words is a huge component to learning a language, where you really just have to learn a ton of words constantly. You need to listen a lot in the language. You should practice speaking, but once again, you can do that in your free time. And even reviewing grammar is something that is just going to take some time, and reviewing that kind of in your daily routine, or you're just over time, is going to be the right strategy. And so when you think about all of these skills, really, like I said, they're independent, and in an independent context, you can just make so much more progress on your own, right? Because a lot of these classes are not just optimized for that. It's learning these concepts, whether it's listening or vocabulary, at a very slow rate. And for the price, it's just simply not worth it. So, even if you really are considering it because you just need some sort of accountability or routine, or you just want to get started, I think there are better ways to go than taking that classroom approach. Ultimately, the self-study is going to get you so much further in the end of the day. Now, that being said, there is a setup time with that, right? You don't exactly have anyone checking your progress. You don't exactly know where to go to find the best vocabulary resources, where to find content, the best apps, and things like that. And there is going to be some setup time and some things that you just have to figure out. And I think a lot of people don't want to deal with that. But ultimately, if you do just kind of, just fight that and just figure it out, even though the class will kind of maybe have a little bit more progress at the beginning because that plan is set up, you're going to just have a dramatic rate of change once you figure that out, and you're going to surpass the classroom effectiveness, in no time. So, I think that's really important to consider. And, ultimately, the self-study aspect, I think, is important in general in life because, there's so many things that you can do from a self-study aspect. I think there's only so many activities that you really need constant guidance where someone is explaining something to you all the time. Maybe a trade skill, maybe very, complex mathematics or engineering or something like that, but even still. And when you think about language learning, just so much of it is independent in nature and just something it's the perfect activity for self-study. So even if you think to yourself, I'm not a good self-studier, I'm not really good at self-learning and things like that, this is a perfect opportunity to kind of get over that barrier and really just make a ton of progress because you can apply the concept of learning a language in this self-study aspect to so many other things in your life. So that's what I had to say. Let me know what you think, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care.